Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Stanley Dyrector Show. Indeed, we have two terrific, talented guests to talk to today. They are screen and television writers. First, well, ladies first, Sharon D. Johnson, a graduate of Barnard College, Columbia University. Now, here are a few of Sharon's credits. She's written episodes of Good Behavior and Buddy. She was a staff writer on those shows, too, and a staff writer on the Sinbad show. Jared Bryant, excuse me, Jared, I always put my foot in my mouth. Jared Bryant is also a playwright and has written for New York Undercover, and another show is airing on the USA Network called G versus E. Now, both my guests are members of the Writers Guild of America West. Sharon is the chairperson on the Committee of Black Writers, and Jared is vice chair. Now, Sharon, Jared, how the heck did you guys become writers, and I'm just a mere host?
I was born, actually. That's how I became a writer. I've always written as long as I can remember. And it's always what I wanted to do with my life, probably because it was the cheapest thing to do growing up. Pencil and paper, and that's it. And it was just always the best way that I could express myself. And I just parlayed it into a profession. As I went through school, I learned that you could do this as a profession, and here I am.
Well, what about you, Jared?
I guess just like Sharon, I always had a passion for it as a child. I enjoyed it, but I didn't think I could make a living doing it. So therefore, I just kind of went to different directions, and then later on in life, I rediscovered the pen and pad and started writing once again and writing plays and so forth, and here I am today.
Well, who inspired you guys? Sharon?
I've always liked novelists. The real literati, so to speak. I love Toni Morrison, anything by Toni Morrison. Mm-hmm. Growing up, I read a lot of African American women writers as a child. I love Shakespeare, I love poetry, mm-hmm. William Blake. Some of my favorite writers are poets. I think the greater the restriction in writing, mm-hmm. the greater the outcome, because you have to get your sentiment across mm-hmm. in as many, within the parameters of whatever the genre you're writing in. I didn't start writing scripts until later, just reading different playwrights and things like that. But I'm doing it, so.
Well, was that your same experience?
Somewhat. I was more of a television kid. Television movies. I loved going to the theater and watching 4 or 5 movies at a time. Just sitting there all day.
Wow.
They used to have these like $2 theaters where you go watch 3 or 4 movies. And I would just sit there and watch the movies or either watch television and read occasionally. Mm-hmm. Not as much as just watching a good movie and feeling what the writer felt and what the characters are feeling. You know, so that was more of my venue.
So you were inspired by these films, but were there any particular writers that kind of
not really. I really didn't know who the writers were. At first, I just thought that the movies were just done.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really?
As opposed to like many people think now. As opposed to there was a script, mm-hmm. And there's a director and there's producers and there's all these other people involved. And now, from this end, I look at movies differently, and the writers and so forth, and who produce the movies, and the directors. And, I just love good material.
Well, in this day and age, how does one make a living as a writer, as a screenwriter particularly? Can you guys give us your take on it?
It's paid for me to be versatile. Having evolved from literature to screenwriting, I can do all of them. So when the screenwriting jobs are not pouring in, I can always, go and pitch an editorial piece or do publicity writing. Poetry doesn't pay, so we can forget that. But it's done me well to have done a lot of different kinds of jobs mm-hmm. Within the area of writing, so that I can always kind of go back to those to earn the survival money. And even that's hard because it's still, almost still being freelance and going to someone and saying, will you buy my idea? So it's still the same thing, but at least when one is dry, you can kind of bounce back and forth and do that. Mm-hmm. I appreciate all the opportunities that I've been given, and hopefully the screenwriting will become as lucrative as other areas have been.
Is that your take, Sharon?
Screenwriting is a very difficult process because you've got to find someone to believe in your material and believe in you and your work, and ultimately, is your talent going to make this producer or the studio money? So I've had projects optioned, and that's a little money, but it's not the big sale that everyone's looking for to put them over the hump and to get the movie produced and receive the credit. My backfall, my way of backing myself up has always been somewhat more of a television route, trying to do the television thing and get on a television show. And other than that, it's been odd jobs here and there, a writer's world, and you kind of go through your ups and downs and your depression and so forth. But then there's always that phone call from the agent or the manager that cheers you up and lets you know that you are doing the right thing and that you should stick to it and that ultimately it will pay off.
Well, let me ask you, how does the seed of an idea germinate in you? How do you get the idea? I mean, thumbnail sketch, give us an idea of what the process is, both you guys, of how you put it on paper.
Well, for me, I've always been an imaginative, again, this is from childhood, just imaginative. And even before I realized it, like you said, you just think things happen. But, as a kid, playing with dolls, I would make up little scenarios, or playing with friends, we'd make up little spy stories. And that was writing, obviously. And as I came to realize that, that's just how good ideas, come to me. Just a little germ of something, someone will say something funny, and I'll say, that's a scene. And then I'll build from there, like, okay, so that's a scene, but what is the basis for it? So it really can come from anywhere for me, because I'm crazy.
Crazy like a fox.
I guess.
That's very true. It's kind of like when I wrote my first play, and I thought to myself, geez, I'll never be able to duplicate, that many stories or what have you, these types of characters again. But you find through everyday life, there's characters everywhere, including yourself, Sharon, and whoever else you meet. And from that, you pull, the characters, and then also stories. Like you're working a job and someone tells a story, or you hear about something, or you watch something on television and you go, that's good, but with a little twist. It could be so much more, or what have you, or even your own life story, things that you've lived through or that others have lived through. So you take that, and like you say, you let it germinate, and then before you know it, it becomes this, this flower that's blooming, and you can't wait to get in front of your computer, typewriter, or pad and begin.
It pays to be an observer.
Yes.
I mean, a sharp observer.
Yes.
Because when you observe one little thing, you can observe
a little nuance.
A couple in a corner, not even
Yeah.
know what they're talking about, and you begin to just click, and make it up. That's me.
There's a thing that I loathe and that many other writers loathe, and that is called stereotyping. And can you give us your feelings about this abomination? I know it's a strong word, but I think it suits what it is. I mean, it's so easy to say African Americans, well, they write black shows. That's what this town has kind of tried to do, to kind of peg writers. Am I talking out of the side of my mouth, or am I talking truth?
No, you're definitely talking truth. Do you want to start it?
No, I mean, you are talking the truth. And I think it just goes back to people not being observant, or maybe observing their own world. I think that a good writer, is an observer of all things, and can, through whatever character they're writing, delve into the universal. It's not a bad thing if black writers write black material, especially if it's their original material. Lorraine Hansberry, another one of my favorite writers.
A Raisin in the
said,
Sun.
That's
Yes.
right. She said that to portray the universal, you must depict the specific. So through specific stories, you can break open the universal to all people. I think the problem comes in where instead of writing character, you write caricature. You're not writing deep enough to embody the whole character. You're only embodying their skin color, or one mannerism that I as a black woman might do, a lesser writer might take that one mannerism, and because I'm black and I did it, define every black woman by that one gesture. I mean, I don't want to start snapping, but we all know the gestures. So I think that it's just going to take people, number one, not being fearful, and really trusting what's on the page and not being fooled or swayed by what they see, and to know that any writer can write anything well if they put in the work.
Go ahead, Sharon.
Exactly. I agree with Sharon. When it comes to writing, all characters, whether they be black, white, or whatever, there's certain human needs that each person, each character brings to the table, and that's universal. So to say that as a black writer I can only write for black characters, or if you're a white writer you can only write for white characters, is absurd. Because we live in a world that's mixed, and we deal with all races and all types every day. And those who don't are definitely less fortunate than those who do. But when you get into, well, he can only write for black people, like, yo, what's up, how you doing, da da da. Yes, I can write that, because that was a part of my life and it still is today, but that's not all that I can write, And if I was to say that to someone who was Jewish or Chinese or what have you, all you can write is, for the Chinese people, and yet they've lived in my world, and they've seen the things that I've seen and done the things that I've done. Why couldn't they write for a show that's white or a show that's black or what have you? If they're a good writer, they should be given the opportunity to write for a show that's other than what the world has stereotyped them as being.
But in order to get one's foot in the door, then, the way the system works, it seems that a black writer is coming in to pitch you an idea, Bill, if we were talking about a studio chief waiting for a writer. Wouldn't it be better that, say, you submitted a script where nobody knew who the heck you were, anonymously?
Well, usually that's what happens. Usually the script is submitted anonymously, unless, of course, the agent or manager discusses, forewarns them, or they know you already. They're familiar with your work, or someone else in the office knows who you are. As far as it going in, anonymous, it's a wonderful thing. When people don't know your skin color and they don't know who you are. But what's very disturbing is when you go in for this meeting after they tell you that they loved your material and they loved your work, and you leave the meeting with this cold feeling like they're not going to hire me, and they don't call you back. And that's disturbing and extremely depressing for most people, most writers anyway, who have worked hard at their craft, and they sweated over that script or that spec script or screenplay for hours and days, and they received the accolades from their managers saying that the executive loved the project, but yet that executive isn't willing to give you an opportunity to write for their show.
The problem I have many problems. The problem I have is that it's almost like when an agent forewarns an executive or an executive producer, this is a black writer, it's almost like they're apologizing for it. And there's no apology necessary. If it's on the page, what are you apologizing for? And if it's not on the page, you shouldn't be submitting me. The problem is the judgment is reversed. You're judging the color of my skin, not what's on the page. And you're presuming that because my skin color is a certain hue, that it's not on the page. For instance, I could take Frasier the Good Son, the Emmy Award-winning pilot script of that series, take the original author's name off, put my name on there, and I guarantee you, people's reaction would be different than giving it an Emmy. It's, well, you didn't quite get the characters' voices. These are the sorts of things that black writers hear because they're being misjudged or prejudged.
They hear them from story editors and producers?
From story editors at feature film companies, from executive producers or whomever is doing the preliminary reading. They hear it from agents, from executives.
No, we're not saying that everyone across the board is like this.
But this is.
But for the majority.
Right.
Of
This is kind of a tendency that's been prevalent to just presume automatically that.
Right. Well, I mean, it has gotten so bad, I understand, because of the fact that there were shows with practically no black characters on it or any other minority characters, and there were no African American, Latino writers or writing those shows, that the NAACP kind of started an initiative. Can you kind of fill us in on that?
Yeah, it's kind of like inbreeding almost, where people become so narrow in their focus that before you realize it, anything else, any other person who is different is phased out. And then, hello, you wake up one day and there's no black characters, no minority characters at all in these casts, and no black or other minority writers on the staffs. And then everybody's like scratching their head saying, how did that happen? And the minorities can tell you how it happened.
Right.
From season after season of saying, we're not looking for shows about black people, or, they're not looking for black writers right now. That's an absurd thing to say. If I worked at AT&T and the head of human resources said that, that would be grounds for a lawsuit, and it would be, Shay TNT. So I don't, it's a ridiculous thing to say. The NAACP jumping in finally and at long last was, to me, a direct outcry from the people being affected, finally going to those organizations whose job it is to do that. It shouldn't be the writer's job to have to go out there and fight. And, if it comes to that, fine, that's what striking and all that stuff is about. Luckily, I've never lived through a strike. I don't know about you. But that's what these organizations are there for, to fight for the people who are being affected by this. And, it's all across the board. Women, to a certain extent, still get a lot of discrimination. People over 40, of every color. It's like as soon as you hit 40, suddenly your ability goes out the window.
It's called gray list.
It's crazy, right?
Yeah.
And we know there are people over 40 in every ethnicity. There are women of different ethnicities. It's a ridiculous thing.
What's really humorous about it is that you'll hear agents and executives say, we're looking for a new voice. We're looking for that new spark. That it's a new show, a new twist, a new whatever. But they're not looking in, the avenues whereas they could find these new voices, and instead they go back to the same, executives and showrunners and what have you that give them carbon copies of the show they had on the air 3-4 years ago. And if you're truly looking for a new voice, if you're truly looking for new angles, I really think you should start tapping into those pools that are untapped, such as, Black writers, Latino writers, Asian writers, Native American writers. Think of all the stories. And think of all the stories you have to tell, not only about their own culture and their own people, but also about their relations in the world today, the majority, how they fit in. Those are colorful. Those stories are colorful, and they're unique. And they should be told. And I think the more that they do that, and the networks fight for these shows, and the executives fight for these shows, and they stay on the air longer than 2 or 3 episodes.
Stay in the same time slot.
Same time slot and everything else, and get the same PR that Seinfeld would get. Who knows what could happen? Who knows what doors?
Let me ask you this. If say I gave you, Jared, $50 million to do a movie for me, what kind of a movie would you do? Or would you do a movie?
I might do a movie, but I might do a television show first, because I might want something a little more, sustainable over time. Like something that's on the air for a year, 2 years, 3 years. Whereas not only can I sustain my own career, but also the career of others, writers, actors, and what have you. And the type of television show would be a drama. It would be a drama. I don't know what exactly that drama would be, but it would be something. I would try to look for something different, something unique in its own way, something from left field. That would be my goal, and to and to really, open some doors that haven't been opened before, and change some mindsets.
What would you do with the $50 million, Sharon?
I would pay off my debts. I would give
That too.
give money to various worthy causes that I find special, and I would produce my feature film, my comedy pilot, and the drama pilot of mine. Would that spend all my money? I'd buy some jewelry.
Buy some jewelry.
Yeah, I would do that.
Now, I understand from talking to a number of writers that we're in the new era of the digital, where it is feasible that one day we can just go out and shoot our own movie. Have you guys heard about that?
Well, you see the commercials with the iMac, you can be your own filmmaker,
Right.
I mean, you could probably do it on any...
Editing,
right.
Pretty much everything from start to finish.
Would this give the writer more independence, or is that putting the writer into another ballgame?
It would. It would give the writer more independence, but at the same time, there's thousands of movies made per year, by writers, by directors that never see the light of day. They never even make it to a video shelf. So what's the material going to be in the end?
Right.
Is it really going to be quality, or is it just going to be quantity?
That's the thing. It can either be vanity or the really dedicated people getting good product made.
Right.
That's
but it's a good thing in the sense that if you do have good material, there is a venue for it. And you can walk in with a videotape of your program and say, look, this is what I have. This is what I have to offer you. And they can watch this, and it's tangible, and oh, this guy's great. Or oh, this young lady's wonderful. She's brilliant. And then maybe you'll get that opportunity.
I think the danger is that it's going to make executives even that much more lazy, inept, whatever your phrase, because if you have to come in with your whole product made, that's going to be another area of weeding out the haves from the have-nots. Maybe everyone doesn't have the facilities to do that. It's happening now where they expect the writer to come in with every element in place. Well, if I have to cast it, shoot it, find every personnel person, well, what is the development department for? So
people don't read
no, they don't.
scripts as it is in this town.
Right.
So. Now we've got videotapes.
I've heard that too.
They
People
don't
read scripts.
They don't read. So
but
therefore,
yet I've heard from another faction that, well, if the script is good enough, certainly somebody will read it.
It goes through the channels till finally someone says, hey, you should read this. After 5 assistants have read it and 2 coverage people. And then finally the executive will read it. At that point, you'll get the call to come in, or they'll want to buy your screenplay. But if it's a videotape, at that point it's pop it in, drink coffee, have some breakfast, play with the kids. Oh yeah, that was pretty good.
It's almost like the attention span is dwindling down, where you have to spoon feed them your product. But I always, despite all that, I never tell new, as in never produced writers, not to pursue the industry. I just tell them to have some sort of spiritual base, because really that's once you send your work out, it's just like, get it to the right people.
You are a teacher. I failed to mention that. You are a teacher, and you have taught at UCLA Extension, haven't you?
Right. Screenwriting, feature film screenwriting.
Okay.
And
which is a tough thing to do.
The
patience.
I did it because I just felt that I could. I know how hard it is when you don't have any sort of support system. And I just really thought that part of my personality would serve me well. And somehow I just intuited that I would be able to teach well. And, so far I've gotten pretty, they rank teachers every year, and I've gotten pretty high rankings from all my students, which is good. And I'm glad that they're getting something out of it. And I hope that, if they do have an idea that is really burning inside of them, I just encourage anyone, really, just find the tools that you can execute that and get that script finished.
Yeah.
And get it out there.
I commend Sharon for for teaching screenwriting. It's a very difficult process. I mean, from start to finish, from idea, you know, to putting it down on paper or what have you, and you know, the conclusion, you know, and then sending it out, you know, and without faith and without belief in yourself and belief in a higher being,
Right.
you know, the rejection will wear you down, you know, and before you know it, you'll, you know, have that one script that you wrote. And I know some of you out there who are watching the show probably have that script,
Right.
you know, on their shelf right now, and they're thinking one day they're going to get back to it. But you can't stop. You know, you can't allow those rejection letters or notices or what have you to hinder your, you know, your career if you choose writing as a career. I always say you have to write with passion, write with purpose, and write with perseverance.
That's the three
And
P's.
right, that's the three P's, you know, and without those three things, my writing anyway, would have no substance, you know. So I always tell writers, you know, listen, you've got to write with, you know, something. You've got to come from somewhere. It's got to come from somewhere within. You know, you just can't watch a movie and say, I'm going to write the next whatever, you know, make $1 million. It doesn't work that way,
Right.
you know.
But there's hope for all of us in this business as the internet and all these other avenues are opening up for the writer?
Of course.
I would say yes. I think bouncing off of your you were talking about stereotyping. Again, everything is a double-edged sword. Everything is a paradox.
Right.
And with more venues that are opening up, you can still tend to be, you know, stereotyped. Oh, he writes for cable, or she writes for primetime, or they write for
Yes.
children's. And, you know, a familiar thing that I
Very,
hear.
very well said. You know, we're wrapping up now.
Okay.
Let's keep talking now. No, continue. I mean, throw in your take on that,
No,
Jared.
it's true. You get, you know, you become pigeonholed. You know, well, this guy writes good cable, television, infomercial stuff. You know, he can't write network, primetime television. You know, which it's only because you needed a job that you took that cable network.